We're going to be talking today about Christian Science and about how this practice of Christianity helps us experience God, not just talk about God or think about God, but really experience God. And that means finding healing, but it also means finding ways to help other people, help our communities, help the globe. You can't have a sense of God that is just in your little corner and feel like everybody else is outside of that. That's not much of a sense of spirituality. So hopefully today we'll get an expanded sense. I'm going to start by telling you a couple stories. And normally as I go along, I really like to explain words like God and spirituality and healing and prayer, words that mean different things to people, just so that we all have a sense of what we're talking about each step as we go along and the logic can build. With these first two stories, though, I'm just going to tell them to you either as I experience them or as I read about it, and then we'll do all the unpacking and the explaining after that, and try and draw some lessons and see how they apply to our world today. So the first story is not mine. The first story is like an old chestnut, but it's one that I come back to, and maybe you'll feel that there's a reason why. This story took place, like I said, a while back. It's about a Secret Service agent who was part of an uncovering of a plot to assassinate the President of the United States while the President was going to be on a trip giving the dedicatory speech at the unveiling of some new monument. This Secret Service agent apparently called two women in the local community where this event was going to be held, and he asked these two ladies to pray for the event, for everybody's safety. These two women were Christian Science practitioners. Those are people who are available to pray with folks about whatever it is they ask for support with, for healing. And I don't know his religious background. The article that I read about it didn't say too much about him. It was written by the women who were called. Well, the event went just fine. There was no assassination attempt. Undoubtedly, the Secret Service was doing their job and keeping things safe, and the women prayed about it. And the article talks a little bit about how they prayed about that event, just in terms of embracing everybody with a sense of goodness being natural for everybody there. There not being two sides of people who would be trying to do something good or trying to do something bad, but everybody being kind of one family and feeling that on some level. What they talked about most in the article is the reason I'm going to tell the story. And that's that independently, they each, as they were praying for the safety of everyone at this event, said that they felt compelled to pray about something else that just kind of came to mind. And that was what might feel like the serious burden of somebody in an office like the President of the United States. Somebody who may feel, whether you're in charge of a classroom or in charge of a company or in charge of a country. Hey, that was good alliteration. I didn't do that on purpose. The feeling of burden, the feeling of responsibility, like I have to get this right. If I don't get it right, there's, maybe people won't be safe or people won't get what they need. And you can just kind of imagine the pressure, and maybe you've felt that in ways in your life too. So it wasn't until after they had both had this thought and the event finished up and they were talking to each other that they both went, wow, you felt compelled to pray about that too, and found that to be kind of interesting. The part that's compelling to me is that after this event, the president got back and the press secretary was saying how everything went so smoothly, and then made this comment. This is a quote in the closing remarks. The president says that while on this trip, he felt the lifting of a crushing mental load which descended upon him when he took the oath of office, and from which he had experienced no relief until now. The reason that's compelling to me is because I think we often wonder, well, what good do our prayers do? Maybe we wonder that about ourselves, but I think certainly it's natural enough to wonder, well, do they make a difference in our community? Do they make a difference for our community leaders or the behind-the-scenes community workers that we don't even know about who are there and who are really making things hum in the right direction? what these women said they prayed about in the article, we'll spend a little more time unpacking, but the gist was just that that guy, along with everybody else, could feel a bigger sense of government, a bigger sense of power, a higher sense of intelligence, that it wasn't a self-generated power, a self-generated know-how that kept people safe or brought progress or accomplished anything, but that every single individual in any station, in any role, gets to feel like the kid, gets to feel like the child in a relationship with a God that is ever present, a God that is loving unconditionally, a God that is providing all that is good and all that is needed for all people. And regardless of what role someone might be playing, that personal sense of burden doesn't grow, because each individual is getting what they need for their role from a higher source. Well, we'll pause on that story, and I'm going to tell you the second story, and then we'll come back to all of this. The second story is more recent and more local. It's a story from last year. It's about a dad who texted me late at night, and he was texting me because his son was in an emergency room. His son had called him and asked him for help, to pray with him. And the dad said, "Can I reach out to somebody else too to pray with us?" It was because of my role as a Christian Science practitioner. This young man had checked himself into the hospital because he was experiencing what he felt were severe symptoms of COVID. He had great pain in his lungs, difficulty breathing, and so forth. He was really afraid, and he had been put into a room and isolated. I think this was, during the time when there was a lot going on, and as I got this request for help, I could imagine what the hallways of this hospital must look like, with care workers running up and down trying to help as many people as possible. This young man was waiting for quite some time before he could be seen. He was afraid, he was hurting. He had grown up going to a Sunday school, but it had been a while. He'd gotten away from any kind of religion, spirituality. In fact, he'd gotten pretty far in another direction with drugs and other things that that had been part of that. So as we talked about how to pray for this young guy, some inspiration, some thoughts started coming, and I shared a little bit of that on text, and a lot of it was just quiet prayer. But some of the ideas that came, one of them is one that's been a real go-to for me in the last couple of years, very helpful for me, is a line from the Bible where St. Paul is talking to a group of folks who are really diverse in their spiritual beliefs, and he's describing God to them in a way that he feels will be helpful. And he says, it's in God that we live and move and have our being. Something else the Bible says is that God is love. And so these two things together for me have for me been a real rock in the last couple of years. The idea that love, a divine love, is the atmosphere in which we live and move and have our being. And that when it looks and feels like we're in another atmosphere, an atmosphere that's dangerous, precarious in some way, contagious in some way, that deeper than that, more fundamental than that, more defining than all that, is a love that is actually our life itself, that is a love that is ever present and that is giving us what we need, because it is the Creator. It is God. And so as we were texting, I was sharing ideas about how, regardless of where he'd been or what had come up or what he'd come into contact with, there was something more defining of his health and of his well-being than any of that. And it was rooted in a God that was love. That he could feel that. He could feel that love with him right there, all around him, within him, that love mattered more than anything else. The other thought that came to me was that this guy who had maybe gotten off track for a while might not even feel worthy of that love. He might not feel like he deserved it. He might feel kind of disconnected from that. And so part of what came to me as I was praying was that there's just nothing in him, no thought that could hold him hostage and make him feel like he wasn't worthy. That this divine love that was speaking to him, he was built in connection with that love. That connection was inseparable. He was built to feel that. He was built to know and understand that, and nothing had ever changed that. Nothing he had done, nothing that had happened in his life could change what he was made to be, which was inherently receptive to this love. That love was in direct communication with him, and he would respond to it. That expanded for me, too, to think about how that love was embracing everybody in that care facility. The people running up and down the hallways, doing everything they could to help others. Talk about a feeling of burden someone might feel when you're doing a double shift and you're trying to help more people than you think you can get to. Well, there was a love that was supporting those people. They could feel that. They could feel embraced by that. They could feel that giving them the energy they needed, the wisdom they needed, the insight that they needed. That this wasn't coming from any kind of a personal power. That what takes care of us, what takes care of everybody absolutely unconditionally, is an ever-present love that is life itself, that is God. So that sense of love just kept growing, just kept expanding, and not in a way that felt disconnected, but in a way that felt like it was truly defining of what people really needed in that moment, in that place. Well, after a couple hours, the dad texted me back, and he said that we were in touch a couple times in that time frame, but after 2 hours, he wrote back and he said, my son's been in touch, and he says he's feeling better. All the pain is gone, his breathing is natural, he feels good, he feels like himself. Well, he waited around until finally he was able to be seen and examined in a number of ways, and ultimately they sent him home, and the last text I got was they could find nothing wrong with him. Well, I followed up before I chose to share the story to see how things were going. And the dad, just corroborated that that's how everything had gone. The son had stayed well and was doing well. But what I loved about it, too, was that in that time frame, in the last year or so, he said his son has really turned a corner and is moving, has a new job, and is going forward with his life in a new and better way. Okay, so these two stories, they're our kickoff for our conversation, for our subject today, and there's a key element that's common in those two stories. And in a word, it's prayer. So that's where I want to start. I want to talk a little bit about what prayer is, what the role of prayer is, what it was in those situations, and then beyond that. So if we're going to look for a definition of prayer and what that means, we can look in the Bible. There's an account in the Bible where it says some of Jesus' students came and talked to him and asked him, how do you pray? And according to that count, his response was, first, go into your closet. In the context of that, he was talking about how prayer should not be something that we do like to make a show for other people. Prayer shouldn't be about worrying about what other people's opinions are and doing something that makes us look good in front of others. But the more I think about that, part of what I get out of that idea of going into your closet is that it's not just about stepping away from other people's opinions and notions of us, but it's about stepping back from our own opinions, taking a step back from our own knee-jerk reaction to things or preconceived notions or fears. We've all had moments where things come up and you have a knee-jerk reaction and then you find out later, oh, it wasn't exactly what I thought it was. So probably we can all resonate with some idea of like, yeah, it's often good to just pause for a moment before you react. But a little deeper than that is like, what does it mean to just really step back from the things that maybe have been hanging out for a long time in the way we see the world or the way we see ourselves or the things that trigger us? How do we just step back when something comes up from that? Well, that's not the end of what Jesus said. The next thing he said after go into your closet was what many Christians today call the Lord's Prayer. And in short, he talks about God in the Lord's Prayer and about God's nature and about our relationship with God. So I think if we're to talk big, broad brushstrokes for a second about prayer, according to Jesus, it was take a step back from the fear and the surface appearances and the reactions and get focused on the nature of God and on our relationship with God. Okay, so the middle part of this is if we're going to get focused on the nature of God, what's God? God is literally an infinite subject. I could ask you all what you thought about God, and you'd all have something different to say. For a while, I used to give lectures for young people exclusively and travel around the world, and I would ask every time, what is God to you? And I got the best analogies. One kid in England one time raised his hand. This kid was about 12 years old, and he said, "God's like Google, he's got the answer to everything." Another kid at a camp, even younger kid, like first grade, said, "God's like my puppy dog that loves me no matter what." So there are just so many ways you could put words to talk about what God is. We're going to look at a few words that Jesus used, and then, we won't spend all day just talking about this one infinite subject. One word that Jesus used for God is spirit. Now, puppy dogs that love us no matter what, we go, yeah, I got that. That feels good. Spirit is not always a word that connects right away. Spirit is a word that can feel pretty abstract, pretty separate from our daily lives, pretty ethereal. So let's just talk about that word for a minute. That's an English word that's a translation of the New Testament where Jesus' life is described, and that was written in Greek. Well, that word spirit that's in Greek, pneuma, probably not with that accent, is also translated in other parts of the New Testament, the exact same word as wind or breath. In fact, it's the same in the Hebrew Scriptures, what Christians call the Old Testament. That same word for spirit is the same word for breath and for wind. And so I think for an audience that was hearing Jesus talk about spirit, maybe this would have seemed a little less ethereal and abstract. Maybe it would give an idea of God being kind of like the very air around us. Not something we see, but certainly something that we know is there. Like our very breath, it's like our life. You don't think a lot about your breathing. If you didn't have breath, you'd think about it real fast. But it's there, it's integral. It gives a kind of feeling of ever-presence, although invisible. In one place where Jesus is talking about spirit, he says, you don't see where the wind's coming from and you don't see where it's going, but you see the leaves moving in the trees. So there's a feeling of an ever-presence that is invisible but palpable, and that does have a visible, tangible kind of an effect. Well, let's look at a couple other words. In the Bible, it talks about God as love, as we mentioned before. It talks about God as truth itself and as life itself. These are words that jive with that definition. God as love or as truth. You don't see love. You don't see truth. But we care about those things. Love matters. Well, we can see love expressed in tangible ways, in acts of kindness and generosity, selflessness. You don't see truth, but you can see truth expressed in acts of integrity and honesty. So these are things that have substance, that have weight, that really matter to us, although they're invisible. And although they're invisible, they have tangible manifestations, which we say are essential to life, to what makes life work well. Well, a couple other things the Bible says. That everything that was made by God, and nothing was made that God didn't make. That God is pure good. And that the same fountain doesn't send forth both fresh water and salty water. So a God that is love does not send forth hate, does not even allow hate, does not use hate for some greater purpose of love in the long run. The same fountain cannot send forth that which is unlike its nature. Truth does not use, allow, make room for dishonesty and that which is untrue. So there's this sense of a God that is ever present, that is pure good, that is creator, that is cause, that is like the principle of the universe, that is the underlying force or power or cause behind everything. Where all ideas, where all creativity, where all wisdom, where all beauty comes from. We could spend all day. I just go on good adjectives. That's God. Those are some of the ways the Bible talks about God. So what's the last part of this? When Jesus says take a step back for a second from the fear and the knee-jerk reactions and the surface level appearances and get focused on the nature of God and on our relationship to God. Well, what is our relationship to a God like the one we just talked about? The first thing the Bible says about anybody is that we're made in the likeness of God. And that's not a one-off statement. Actually, that comes up a number of times. Jesus said, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. St. Paul said, put off the old man, the old sense of yourself. Put on the new man, the new idea of yourself, which is created to be like God. There's one that I really love. This is from the Hebrew prophet Isaiah. And he's writing in a very poetic way, like it's God talking to us. And this says, "Bring my sons from far away and my daughters from the end of the earth, everyone who's called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made." So sons from far away, daughters from the ends of the earth, that's everybody, right? That's all-inclusive. Called by the name of God. In the Bible, something that's done in the name, it means the authority or the nature of something. Like, I come in the name of the king. It's the authority of the king. So called by God's name means called by the authority or the very nature of God. Formed and made by God. Well, if it's a God like we're talking about, a God that is love itself and life itself and truth itself, not like a tribal leader up in the clouds that hooks some people up with good but not other people, intervenes sometimes, the kind of that view of God. That's not really what's included here. Did you hear the purpose word though? The reason?
For my glory.
For my glory. Well done. So to glorify something, one definition is to make it known. Now, to make God known, we could go up on the street corner up here, and you've seen those people with the big signs that they like, and the really good ones, they can twist it around. And the really, really good ones, they can like flip it around and flip it behind their back and up in the air. Well, that would be one way to make God known. You could go out on the street corner, you could talk about God, you could do something in the name of God. But this isn't actually talking about what we do or what we say. It's talking about who we are. It's talking about our very being, what we're made to be. We are made for the glory of God. We are made to make God known. Well, remember, God's invisible, truth, life, love, not something we see, but ever-present, palpable, has an effect. So the message to me when the Bible says we're made in the very likeness of God is that we're the place where God shines through. We're the place that love is made manifest. We're the place where truth and life are made manifest. That's us. Love on legs. It's the good of God. All those endless adjectives we could just talk about forever is what's built into our very nature. This is what's normal. This is what's natural. This is what's fundamental. This is what is just there. It means that we're built to be peaceable. We're built to be whole. We're built to be creative. We're built to be safe. We're built with purpose. We're built with opportunity. Anything that pertains to God's nature takes form, has an expression in us. We're built equal. We're built honest. We're built strong. We're built balanced. Think about how many things in life that are problems start from the idea of being imbalanced. Whether it's imbalance in body or imbalance in bank account or imbalance in, you name it. The idea that balance and harmony are natural to us, that's actually normal in our lives. That seems to be the message. Well, okay, so let's talk about that and then what we see around us every day and the kind of thoughts that come to us and why that doesn't seem to line up and what we can do about it. I don't know about you, but they say that we're not supposed to use our cell phones as our alarm in the morning because it's like gets you off track. You're always looking at your phone, and you shouldn't, should put it away. Well, I'm not obedient to that. I do use my phone as my alarm, and it's very tempting in the morning when you pick it up to look at the news alerts and the things that are there just waiting for you. And I don't know about you. The last time you turned on the radio or flipped through those news alerts, it's not like a lot of times you're scrolling and going, it's the glory of God. There's some more glory of God. You scroll a little more, you're like, another story about the glory of God. So here the Bible is saying we're made for the glory of God. This is who we are. This is what is going on all around us. And then that's not what it seems to be. So how do we connect the dots? Well, this is where the word that's key in our title comes in, and that's discovery. Because this spirituality, a spiritual perspective of things like we've been talking about, it can seem separate from daily life. And the way people start to look at it after a while is that On the positive end, that's like, hey, that's your thing. That if that makes you feel good, if that's your tradition and gives you hope, hey, that's great. Like, it's good to be a positive thinker. And on the other end of that spectrum, it's kind of like that dumbs you down. That's just sticking your head in the sand. That means you are not aware of what's happening in the world and you're not dealing with it. And maybe you've heard the phrase, religion is the opiate of the masses. But either one of those, whether it's kind of positive or kind of negative, it kind of amounts to the same thing, which is all this is just maybe something that you keep in your thinking, and then there's what the world is doing. And that the two maybe only meet a little bit, if at all. Well, the word discovery to me really challenges that, and I would say even overturns it, because discovery is what has progressed humanity throughout human history. Discovery implies that something is already there, though, that it's not just somebody's positive thinking, like aerodynamics. You know, we all know about the Wright brothers. You may know about Santos Dumont from Brazil and other folks who are grappling with the concepts of the laws of aerodynamics around the same time. They were all approaching it in their own way, but there was a commonality. Not one of them went up to a tall hill and just thought positively about flying and took a leap. They were wrestling with something. It was a concept that was not visible at first. We didn't first see a plane flying through the sky and then discover the laws of aerodynamics. It was a concept. It was, and the opinions around, the preconceived notions of humanity probably ran pretty contrary to all of that. But because it was actual, there were actual laws there, universal. There weren't the Santos Dumont laws and the Wright brother laws. There was just the laws. And to the degree that any one of these people was understanding those laws and building on laws was to the degree that they had success. And to me, this concept of discovery, it patterns what Jesus talks about with prayer. It seems to me anyway. You take a step back from the preconceived notions, the fears, the surface appearance of things, get focused on something that is fundamental, that is eternal, that is already there, that can be understood. And then build on that, act on that, look for tangible results. It seems to me that this is the pattern we see throughout the Bible. The Bible, was written by many different people, men, women, young, rich, young, old, rich, poor. Could be anyway. And they had different ideas about God even, but you see a pattern emerge that these people in difficult circumstances, whether it's in the middle of a war or a famine or when they've been outcast from society or labeled as incurable, when they take a step back from the moment and they get focused on their best sense of what God is, and then they act on it, it makes a difference. They find safety in the middle of war. They sometimes even help their enemies find safety. They find food in the middle of a famine. They find health and well-being again when they've been labeled incurable. They find community again when they've been outcast. You start to see this kind of cause and effect relationship, which to me patterns more of that concept of discovery. Well, discovery is what has progressed humanity in so many ways, not just things like inventions, but you think about like 100 years ago, my understanding is that women were viewed by many people as literally physiologically less developed men. Right? It was like a biological process that had just stopped and not succeeded to its full potential at some point. That was the general opinion of good, kind-hearted, intelligent people. Well, let's imagine for a second that a really kind-hearted person comes along and says, we should really try and make everybody equal. What should we do to these physiologically less developed people? Maybe we create a pill or something, or a special exercise, and let's and then we'll turn them into equal people. Would that have worked? No, it wouldn't have worked. And why? Because they were already equal. So what had to happen? What has moved humanity forward in human history? It's a step back from the preconceived notions, the traditions, the ways of looking at things and going, wait a second. It's discovering what's already there, what's already true, and then acting on it. So what happens as it starts to dawn on humanity little by little, and I'm not saying we're done yet, but to the degree that it has seen for what it is, what is actually already there, then we build laws that better reflect it. We act in ways that are more true to what has always been a fact. Looking at the USSR, as all the stuff has been happening with Ukraine, and just going back and learning a little more and re-educating myself about how things have evolved over the years, looking at when the USSR came apart, and many of the countries which are now considered Eastern European countries were leaving the USSR, it was incredible to me to think from this lens of discovery and watch how, as an idea spread, an idea that was, I would say, very normal, very natural, that people could have democracy, or they could make a choice for themselves about what kind of government they wanted. They could be free. You would watch a whole country come out and vote in a way they'd never felt like they had the permission or the ability to do before. And then the next day, another country would do it, a whole other country. And a week later, a whole other country would do it. And there was this string of this change happening. And the very last one to change was really ruled by an iron fist of a dictator that had been in power for a long time. And as I was watching this historical video, I was talking about how there'd been an arrest of somebody who'd been speaking out against the government. And the people started protesting. And in order to quell this protest, this leader at the time, he called a big rally in his own honor. Something like 100,000 people came out. And he's given his talk, and at some point the people start chanting the name of the guy who was unjustly imprisoned. And the dictator lets it go on for a little while, and then he does this thing where he raises his hand. And as this video was explaining, every time the guy had raised his hand at any rally ever in the past, everybody knew, you get quiet. You get quiet or you get shot. And so he's letting it go on, and I'm watching the video, and he raises his hand, and for the first time, people don't get quiet. They just kept chanting. And you watch the look on his face. He kind of puts his hand down, and he does it again. He does it again, and it doesn't do anything. And the entourage around him standing on the balcony is like, they realize the jig is up. This never had power. It seemed like it did. There was tremendous fear behind it. There was tremendous suffering from anyone who had crossed it. We're not saying that the misimpressions of humanity in history haven't caused suffering. They have. But it doesn't mean they're rooted in something true. And it doesn't mean that just trying to fix them on the surface level gets us anywhere. What has progressed humanity throughout human history is when an idea more natural, more normal, what has always been normal, what has always been possible and true, dawns in thought, and humanity takes a step forward. The people that day had the courage to act on something that was always within them. This never had power, but when they saw that for themselves, 5 days later, the government had changed. It wasn't easy. That day wasn't without its violence, actually. But the country moved forward, and that whole area of the world moved forward. It's just relevant to right now, but there's so many examples of that. We could just keep talking about it. But that's discovery to me. It's more than positive thinking. It's not just somebody standing out there saying, I have a positive thought about freedom today. I have a positive thought about equality today. No, it's like, this is normal. This is fundamental to all things. This is always possible. And it's understanding it. It's that mental shift. When the Wright brothers, Santos Dumont, were working on the laws of aerodynamics, it was a mental journey first and foremost, as it was in all these other circumstances. There was an evolution of thought going on, and it was invisible. But as that got clearer and more based on what was normal and true, the more empowered people were to move forward in humanity. To me, that's discovery. That's the pattern of the Bible, and that's what we're talking about today. So let's look back at those first two stories, and then we'll apply this to some other things. To me, that young man whose dad texted me late at night, the surface level logic was he'd been exposed to something, likely, wasn't feeling well. And you can see a kind of cause and effect there. We've all seen it. Most of us, I would imagine, have experienced it for ourselves, whether it's It's something that says it's a problem that's hereditary or a problem that's atmospheric or contagion or whatever it may be. And it's not to deny that or say that people don't suffer, or that we haven't seen or known it. It's the question of what we do about it, how we're going to handle it. Now, if I wrote on my little imaginary board here, 7 plus 3 equals, you all know that 7 plus 3 equals what? 73, right? No, you were right. It was 10. It's 10. But let's say you didn't know math. And let's say that you only had a surface level logic, and somebody told you the plus sign means you put them together. Well, there is a surface level logic to that, right? 7 and 3 together equals 73. Well, if you try and do your grocery shopping with that math or balance your bank account with that math, it will cause suffering. So imagine somebody comes along and says, no, it's not 73, it's 10. And you imagine the incredulous person looking at them and saying, that's ridiculous. You put a 7 and a 3 together and you end up with a 1 and a 0? I'm sorry. That just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And what can you say? All you can say is test it, right? Put it into practice. Let's just test this. Let's see if we get better results. Let's see if there's less suffering. There's a principle of math that can be understood, that can be demonstrated. It runs contrary to the mere surface level logic. When we look out and we see things like that young guy, there could have been any number of reasons on the surface as to why he was suffering. But that was like a 7 plus 3 equals 73 kind of a logic. How are we going to deal with it? Were we going to get to work on that 73 and try and make it better? No, we were going to take a step back for a second and go, wait a second, what is the real cause of this young guy's life, of his well-being, of his inspiration? What has always been the cause? What is the root, always, of his wholeness, of his goodness, of his purity, of his ability to be free? What is it? We know the surface level storylines. We've seen and experienced it, but we all are capable of discovering more of what is normal and natural. The 7 plus 3 equals 10, our true nature made in the likeness of God. We just have to test it. We have to, and step by step, just like in math. Some of us like math more than others. I've got lots of math analogies, but it took me a while to get good at math. Step by step, we can each learn because we're built for that. That's kind of the idea behind any form of healing. Healing is not a miracle. Healing is not the you're broken and the far-off tribal God again kind of comes in and hooks you up, makes you good again. Healing is about what, you get the theme already, right? It's normal. It's discovering more of who and what we already are, what God is and what God is doing. That's really what it comes down to. This is not something we generate. It's not something we cause. It's what is God doing? What is God causing? That other story, the first one that we started with, about the president, and starting to answer a little bit this question, what good do our prayers do for others? Thinking of another historical story, end of World War II, as the Allied powers were advancing and German forces were retreating. Apparently, the order was given from Hitler to just scorched earth, anywhere where the armies had to pull out. In Paris, for example, the commander there was given the order to blow up Eiffel Tower, Louvre, Arc de Triomphe, all of it. Leave nothing behind. In the Netherlands, it was bridges, roads, depots, even in East Germany, or in West Germany as they were retreating. So what happened? Anyone been to Paris? You know the Arc de Triomphe is still there. The Eiffel Tower is still there. It didn't happen. Well, why? Well, because somebody got the idea that maybe they weren't going to listen to that order. And it wasn't easy. It was at their own risk, and it was, it took some work in coordinating with other people who'd gotten similar orders. But a number of people in many of these circumstances just had a better idea other than what they'd been trained to do and how they'd been trained to think. This is just a little indication to me when I think about how I pray about anybody, whether it's somebody who's in a leadership role or somebody who's that foot soldier or somebody who's that worker in the cafe or just whoever or wherever in our community or in the world. When we are embracing our brothers and sisters, when we're making spiritual discoveries in our own prayers about what God is and what God is doing, that's universal. It's applying to everybody because it's either true or it's not true. And if it's true and we're embracing folks, to me, it's a little bit like if we had blackout blinds on these windows and then somebody came in here and just pulled them all open and the light came in. Anyone within the radius of that light, even if they weren't the ones who opened it, would be benefited by the light. They would be able to see more and not bang into the furniture or whatever. When somebody anywhere in the world gets that right idea, something that's a little bit more intelligent, a little bit more fair, a little bit more peaceable, that regardless of what their role seems to be or what orders they've been given previously or how they've been educated or what the general belief of everyone around them is, like if you're in a role like this, you've got pressure on you. So to open the blinds is to let the light in and allow anybody to better see for themselves what is normal and what is natural. A little bit more of what God is and what God is doing and what that means for today, what it means for all people. I've thought about how to articulate this, and I think in some ways it's kind of like a lawmaker who writes a law. They're not going to go out, they're not going to deal with every person and be there when that law applies to every single individual. But when the law is passed, the law has an effect. It impacts the lives of everybody who are touched by that law. But this is like discovering a law of light, a law of understanding, a law of goodness that is at work, that is governing everybody. In the end, our prayer is not about changing other people. It's not about how does my mental juju go out and affect somebody and make them think the way I want them to think about the world. Prayer actually takes a lot more humility than that. It's that step back from my own opinions and preconceived notions and discovering what is God doing? What does that mean? What are the implications of that for the world? For everybody that is out there and needs to feel that light. It's that recognition that there is a law of good in their lives. And the prayer is not changing them. The prayer is watching how truth itself destroys misconceptions themselves. Not this person's misconceptions and those person's misconceptions, but what is wrong, period, in thought, anywhere. The trend in thought, overturned by the light, by a true idea. That's what I think we see going on like in the USSR. It's a true idea that was spreading, right? It wasn't one person trying to go door to door and convince everyone. It was just truth itself. The light, overturning what was never right, what was never normal. That's what's going on in any of us when we kind of go, oh, right, I'm loved. I'm safe. Good is real. Good is natural. Good is normal. Good is present. Good has power. That's that awakening. That's that dawning, like, wow, that's the good news. That's what Jesus, the gospel means in the Bible. It means good news. Like, good news. Good. Good is actually a thing. News alerts, whatever, like right in the face of that. This is big. It's bigger. It's been around a lot longer, and it's not going anywhere. It's something we can discover. It's something we can rely on. It's something that we can prove in the world. And it has moved humanity since forever, and it is the same trajectory that is moving humanity today. And we can discover a little bit more of that, just step by step. We can be part of that. We can let that light shine through in our lives. There's a great quote here from Mary Baker Eddy, who's the founder of this movement, this approach to Christianity, Christian Science. I love this from her book, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, and I'll talk a bit more about it in a minute. She writes, "The conceptions of mortal erring thought must give way to the ideal of all that is perfect and eternal. Through many generations, human beliefs will be attaining diviner conceptions, and the immortal and perfect model of God's creation will finally be seen as the only true conception of being." The next sentence starts with the word science. It's talking about the science of Christ. She says it reveals the possibility of achieving all good and sets mortals at work to discover what God has already done. So what's the how behind all of this? How does this work? What is that power? And in a word, it's Christ. You probably all know that Christ was not just the last name of Jesus. Like if it had a driver's license, it wouldn't have said Jesus, Christ. Christ was a title, and that title symbolized the unique way in which the light of God shone through his life in human history. It was the presence and activity of God being made manifest. But in the bigger picture, that Christ power didn't start with when Jesus arrived or leave when Jesus left. The presence and activity of God is ever present. It's here and now. It's around the corner. It's everywhere. That presence and activity of God. And Jesus showed us something unique about grace. And grace, in a short phrase, could be called the unearned love of God. Why is it unearned? Because it's already there. You don't have to earn something that's already there. You don't have to earn 7 + 3 equaling 10 for you. You don't have to work your way up to it. You certainly can't mess it up. Like, I did some bad things in my life. It's not 10 for me anymore. The love of God, the good of God, what our true nature is, our innocence, our purity, our goodness, our wholeness. Doesn't matter what we've thought or what's happened to us or what we've been through or what the world thinks. Doesn't matter about age or skin color or economic background. Doesn't matter where we come from or culture. It's either there or it's not there. And it is there. That's grace. That's the good of God, the freely given, unearned love of God. Available to everybody in every circumstance. Unchangeable, ultimate power. Jesus showed us something unique about salvation, and salvation, in a short phrase, could be the discovery that nothing can separate us from the love of God. Jesus showed us a kind of power that was different than the world's expectation of power. It was a power that came through meekness, through love, through hungering and thirsting after righteousness, or words that he used. Mercifulness. Why? Because those are the characteristics that allow us to discover the wind at our backs, the power that moves us, the power that sets us free, the power that sets all of humanity free, impartially. Those are the qualities of thought. So that it's the true idea of God coming through. That's Christ. That's wherever we are, whoever we are, whatever we have banging around. It's like right piercing through that is the light of love that meets us right where we are, and just the way we can understand it. That's the true idea of God coming just to the human experience. That's Christ. We're pioneers every day. Every day is about discovering a little bit more of that. The pioneer doesn't know what's up ahead. The pioneer doesn't know what's over the hill in front of them. If they knew, they wouldn't be a pioneer. They would be the person following the pioneer. They're the person who got the news from the pioneer. But every moment is kind of like, walking this walk of discovering a little bit more. Okay, God, what do you want me to know today? What more can I see about my community today? What more can I discover about God's presence and goodness in the world today? In the face of what comes to me, little thoughts that aren't so nice about myself, what can I discover about what you see, what you're doing, what you're causing? That there really is nothing more to me than what you are making. There really is no other here other than the here that is in and of you. Every day, just a little bit more, giving our consent. I like that word. It makes a big difference to me. It's like, okay, I give my consent today, God. I give my consent to discover a little more. I want that. I'm looking for that. Sometimes I forget, but sometimes it really helps to pray first and foremost that we don't forget. I will not forget. I will not be made to neglect what this promise is for me and to just get sucked into the routine of the day, but to rather follow Christ, to follow that true idea of God that's coming to humanity and showing me what it means right now in my life and in the life of others. I know the folks here at this church told me when we were talking about this event and praying about it a little bit, a few of the things they're praying about in this community, and one of them, somebody said the folks that are houseless, and of course people are in that position for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's economic, sometimes it's that they have broken down relationships in their family. They have somewhere to go, but they don't feel they can draw on that. Sometimes it feels like red tape, that has kept somebody out of where they could be if only they could, work their way through the system. But let's just think about what we've been talking about for a minute. how that true idea of God meets us right where we are and leads us step by step. The flow of God's goodness is like a river, and I just think that's been helpful to me so many times when it seems like circumstances have said, well, the channel in which I expected God's goodness to flow in my life seems blocked off right at the moment. Well, what happens when you put a big boulder in the middle of a river? Where does the water go? It goes around it, goes over it. If it builds up long enough, maybe it finds a whole other channel. The next logical channel. It's like not a choice. It's not that the water goes, I'm going to go there. It's like it's just the inevitable kind of channel where it can flow is where it flows. This is helpful to me because sometimes we think there's not a way forward. And when we pray to embrace other people in our community who may be feeling that way, for whatever kind of a reason, to me it helps to acknowledge first and foremost that channel is there for them. It's there for all of us at all times. We're not talking about plan B channel, like, sometimes people go, well, I wanted my good to come this way, or the world in general says, this is where I get goodness, if I'm this kind of a person, or I have this kind of a job. But, well, I don't see it there, so I guess I'll have to go with this. But wherever the water is flowing, it's the same water, right? It's not like plan B water. It's not second best water. It's the same water that would have flowed in this channel is now flowing in this channel. And so sometimes it takes humility to take that step back and just say, well, okay, God, show me where the water's flowing today. I will go. I will listen. I will discover. And I won't accept less. This is not about being second class water. I will kind of demand that I will find the water, but I will have humility in where and how, knowing that nothing can interrupt that, nothing can get in the way of that, and I can discover it each day in my life. That people who feel a roadblock and can find ways to repair their relationships with friends or with family, that they can find a way through the red tape, that just whatever the roadblock seems to be, we can be embracing that people are hearing what they need to hear, getting the ideas they need to take the next step today and to go forward from there. That nothing can hinder that. Nothing can separate us from that love of God, that action of God in our lives. This isn't really about a new doctrine, a new creed, a new way of codifying things. This is like we started out by just saying it's a way of living it. It's a way of saying, how do I really experience this in my life today? And that's what Mary Baker Eddy, that's why she called it a Christian Science. It's what she felt she discovered. She had faced chronic illness from the time she was a little girl, and what she was discovering about God by the midpoint of her life set her free from that. It healed her of that. It healed her of the effects of a severe accident from which many people didn't expect her to recover. From there, she challenged many other expectations about, this is a woman who lived in the 1800s into the 1900s, challenged expectations of people in her time who thought, for example, that it was literally immoral for a woman to speak publicly, especially about things like spirituality and religion and Christianity. Well, if you're reasoning from the world's point of view, you might say to yourself, well, what can I do? What can I not do? Who am I? But if you're just reasoning out from, well, what is God? And what does that mean about me? And what does that mean? What are the world's needs? How could I meet those needs? If I'm just following how God leads me, if I'm just acting on that information alone, what does that do? She's an example of somebody who just reasoned through everything spiritually and what that can accomplish. If there's nothing else you can say about her character, this is somebody who is just absolutely committed to that idea. I'm going to reason step by step spiritually about everything. I'm not going to let that mix in with other ways. And so she preached, she spoke, she pioneered in copyright law. She was a philanthropist. She wrote the book I quoted to you, Science and Health, the Key to the Scriptures. She wrote other books too. This is the book that explains Christian Science, that talks about the Bible and how we really experience the Bible's promise in our life today, how we bring it to life. It's not a tradition. It's not a codified just set of human actions. It is something we can understand, we can feel, we can live, and we can experience. And the last 100 pages of this book are all people who wrote in and said, I did that. People said they found healing from things that had been labeled incurable. and felt like their whole trajectory of their life changed. She started at 87 years old, an international news source. Again, we're talking about how do you reason? Step back for a minute. So, surface level logic, 87 years old, what are you going to do today? Well, what if you see that at your time, journalism is in a bad state, people aren't getting accurate information, you can't be a healer in the world if you don't really know what's going on. What does the world need? Okay, if that's what's needed, what do I do? How do I follow? How do I pioneer? Step by step. Not empowered by personal, like I'm so smart, or I'm so clever, I'm so strong-willed, but just what kind of power does the truth itself have to succeed today, to do good, to get clear out of its way anything that is false? A lot. Infinite, actually. Okay, then what does that mean about my actions? What does that mean about where I go and what I do today? Empowered by the truth itself. So at 87 years old, she starts an international news source, which is still around today. She started magazines, which are still around over 100 years later, where everyday people are writing in and saying, hey, this is what I just discovered, and I found healing in my life. Significant transformation in my life. That just anybody, it's been a grassroots healing movement from the beginning, because she discovered this, helped others with it, healed others with it. They turned around and did the exact same thing. They found healing in their lives and helped others with it, who then found healing in their lives and helped others with it. Because it's about the power of universal truth that just comes to everybody. That's Christ again, right? That presence and action of God in our lives. It's not a new thing. It's a discovery of what has always been here. She did start a church, but a church was not a place where you got access to God. It wasn't a place where somebody in between you and God could grant you something. It was simply a place where people got together to support each other in this step-by-step growth and do more for their communities than they could do separately, and do more for each other in their support. I'm going to read you a line here from the Bible, and then I'm going to tell you one last story, and we'll wrap up. This is from Paul in 1 Corinthians, and he says, "Now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror, but then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete, but then I will know everything completely, just as God now knows me completely." So there's that acknowledgement of there seems to be a mixture. We all see plenty of beauty and good around us, but it feels sort of distorted, partial, incomplete. But then I will know everything completely, as God already now, right now, knows me completely. That promise that's what we're building on. Every time the thought comes back to us and says, you got to work your way up to this, we get to step back and go, wait a second. Sometimes the prayer that's most helpful to me is, thank God it's not about me. It's not about something I think I already know or have figured out. It's about, what is God? What is God doing? Oh, right, it's already here. That's the biggest relief. I feel like I need that about every 10 minutes or so. There's always this little idea pulling you off going, oh, how do I make this happen? No, stop. It's the grace of God. Oh, wow, that's right. So this last story, the reason I'm telling it is because a little bit like I was just saying, it can feel sometimes like we don't know enough to really make a significant difference in the world, especially through prayer. It can feel like even if we have had some success and really just finding comfort and inspiration in our lives, that we don't know, who's out there, who needs what, how our prayer is going to help them out. And so, hence this story. This is from a time when I was in high school, and somebody who's a friend of mine, who I used to give a ride to school, especially when it rained, but just if he needed a little extra help. He came from a family that was in turmoil, that his household was not in good shape. He struggled there. It is not a peaceful place. And we weren't ever super close, but he'd come over when he needed a ride, and we'd hang out once in a while after school. Well, one morning he came really early, before I was even up. So early he walked around and he knocked on the window on my bedroom, on my bedroom window. And I got up and I went and I let him in the front door, and he came in and he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm sorry I'm early, but I can just hang out till you're ready." And I said, "Okay, that's fine." So I got my stuff and I went to go get ready in the bathroom, and I realized I forgot something. So I went back to my room, and he was in there sitting in a chair, and he had a knife out. He had been running the knife up and down his arm, and there was scratches. When I walked in the room, he folded up the knife and he put it in his pocket. And I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Oh, nothing. I was playing around, and obviously I did that too much, and I shouldn't have done that. Don't worry about it. It's cool. No big deal." I was like, okay. I didn't really know what to say. I didn't know what to think. So I didn't say much more. I grabbed my stuff, and I said, "All right, I'll be back soon," and went to the bathroom. Well, as I was taking a shower, in the middle of my shower, the idea came to me, there's something really wrong. And at first I thought, I don't know what to do about this. I don't know what to do. And then came a thought which I'm going to articulate now in words that I didn't have then. Then it was more of a feeling. But here's how I would look at it retrospectively. As I really reached out to something bigger than myself, something higher, to God, what do I do? What do I need to know? How to help? This feeling started to just grow in me. And it was not so dissimilar to what I described about what helped in prayer with the guy who was in the emergency room that day when we first started talking. It was a feeling that, you know what, even though you're not in that room and you don't totally know what's going on and you don't feel like you have any ability to do anything, there is something there, and that thing is love. That thing is a love that is God. And that love that is God is not a small thing. It's a very big thing. In fact, that love that is God is filling that whole room. It's filling every inch of that room. There's not a corner in the room where all is good and then there's this dark space where this guy is. But right where he is, right where his thinking is, right where his life is the power of love. And he may feel like his life is defined by what his parents have been doing or what's going on in his household or what he's been through. But that thought is an enemy, and that thought is not his thought. That thought does not have power over him, and it doesn't get to push him in any direction that's harmful to him. There's a bigger, better, omnipotent thought that is coming to him, and that is that love is moving him, love is caring for him, love is defining his life. This love is giving him his opportunity for the next step going forward, that nothing can keep him back from that he can feel that. Love is giving him hope. Love is giving him courage. Love is comforting him. Love is not in a battle with something else. Love is the only thing that is there right now. He's built to hear it. He's built to feel it. He's built to respond to it, and he is responding to it. There couldn't be another cause, and therefore there can't be another effect. That's the only thing that's going on right now. And the more I dwelt on that, the more it felt big to me, and the less it felt like a struggle, the less it felt like light and dark in combat. It just felt like the dark was receding, and I was feeling so uplifted by the idea that, oh my gosh, this is really true. This is really all that there is in his life. I've had lots of other thoughts, lots of other views of him in the past from what he's told me, but that stuff, wow, it never penetrated. It never got to him. It never got to his life. It never got to the power at work in him. So I started to feel peaceful. And as I felt peaceful, I felt like I could go on with getting ready, and I finished up with my shower and my stuff. And when I was done, I went into the room, and he was there. He was asleep in the chair. And I woke him up. We had a bowl of cereal. We got in the car. We started driving. And we were quiet until we were most of the way to school, and then he says, "Hey, I have something I need to tell you." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Anytime I come to your house, it just feels really peaceful here." And he said, "I came to your house this morning to commit suicide." I said, "I came to your house because I wanted to go somewhere where it was peaceful." Then he described to me how he was going to do it. That there's ways you can be saved and ways you can't be saved and so forth. He was going to do it the way you can't be saved. After that, though, he said, I have to tell you something. I can't explain it, but after you left the room and went back to the shower, I got my knife back out and I was going to do it. And then all of a sudden, something just hit me. He said, all my desire for that went away. I suddenly felt a peace that was really big that I knew was going to be with me forever. And he said, I can tell you that's never going to happen. I am never going to do that. You can be sure of it. That's behind me now. And he just said, I'm really grateful. Again, I didn't really have words. I didn't know what to say. I just said, I'm so grateful. I'm glad you're feeling better. If there's anything I can do. And we went to school. That was the end. And we stayed loose friends through school, and I see him on Facebook. He's still around. He's doing fine. Well, when we think about what we can or can't do, right in the face of that, that's the time to say, oh, right, I'm defined by God. My mentality, my spirituality, my capacity, it's not generated by where I've been or what I've done, who I know, what I've read. It's generated by what God is causing in me. God is the cause. God is the substance. God is the intelligence. God is the power. God is the trajectory. There is nothing else. There's any other element that would seem to be a factor, it just doesn't weigh in what God is and what God is doing. This doesn't change. If it seems like we've made a mistake, if it seems like we've failed, if it seems like we've ever known somebody who's failed, right in the face of that, we get to go back and say, like Paul was saying, I want to see as you see. I want to know as you know. Wake me up, show me, guide me, because it's never changed. There is never a thing that could happen where we can't go back and see it in a new way and move forward and see that every individual who's ever lived has that same right and always will, because nothing can separate them from the love of God, ever, forever. This is bigger than just how we make things good between here and there, birth, death. This is like the life that is life that will never change. The life that is eternal. The life that is God itself. And when we see limited horizon lines, we see one behind us and we see one in front of us, we call that birth, we call that death, right? It seems like a beginning and an end. Well, when you get up a little higher, those horizon lines push out further. You get high enough, there's no more horizon lines. There's just one. And that's life. Life is just one. We are just one with God. There are no beginnings and endings. And step by step by step, God is proving this to us. God is proving that everything we face, we can challenge it. We can challenge it with what is normal, what is natural, what is already here. It's a God-given thing. And that our prayers, even though we don't always know what's going on, we don't know the ins and outs of everything in the news, we can embrace our brothers and sisters. We can embrace the world. We can know that God is there communicating to every individual, where they seem to be on this side of the equation or that side of the equation. There's no division in God's family. There's no this side and that side. We all have the same thing to do. We all have the same work, which is to take a step back and get pretty humble and find this way forward that is for everybody. Nobody's cares left out. Nobody victimized in the process. Nobody steamrolled in order to make for some greater good. A way forward that takes care of everybody. That's God's way. And we don't have to settle for less than that. So when we don't feel like we know how to achieve that, that's okay. We can discover a little bit more and listen to what God is saying and follow. These last two lines, one from the Bible, one from Science and Health. St. Paul said, "See, now is the acceptable time. See, now is the day of salvation." Right now. That's good news. Not tomorrow, not once something, whatever, fill in the blank. Right now. Now is the acceptable time. Right now, God is giving us what we need to discover. Whatever weighs on us, we just got to be honest with ourselves, honest with God, put it right there and look for God's way of looking at it. Right now. We don't have to take on all the world's issues, just the thing that's on our radar right now. And that's enough, step by step. This line from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, she writes, "It's possible, yea, it's the duty and privilege of every child, man, and woman to follow in some degree the example of the Master by the demonstration of truth and life, of health and holiness." So it's possible, and it's for everybody, everyone. Why? Again, because it's built into us. We don't earn it. It's what God is, and it's what God is doing. And this is what empowers us to follow the example of the Master, of Jesus. Right? Jesus said that. He said, "You will do the works that I do. Whoever follows me will do the same works." He said, "The Spirit of truth will guide you into all truth. It will lead you into understanding. It will help you remember the things that I've done." He said this in many different ways. There will be signs that follow you. It's like you follow, you're like the boat, and the stuff, it's like the wake behind you will be godlike. Health, holiness, what is normal and natural in the world. So it's for everybody. And then there's results. And when it doesn't seem like there's results, that's okay. We step back and we discover a little bit more. And we take the next step until we see it. Because it's inevitable. Every cause has an effect. You can't escape that. And that cause is pure good. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being what God has made you to be. Each of you unique. God is infinite, so we're not cookie cutter little expressions of God. Each in our own unique individual ways, but godlike. Godlike qualities and characteristics built in. Thanks for letting your light shine. Thanks for taking the time to care enough about your community, about others, to work to discover a little bit more each day. And thank you for taking the time to be here today and be part of this conversation. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.